this evening, as we confront a really terrible situation on the borders of Poland, we thought we'd look at a number of poems that deal with war. And in all of them, I think there's an attempt to find hope and to find our common humanity. And I think I want to start with almost a sort of discussion rather than an argument between Auden, who said poetry's never stopped a tank, and Seamus Heaney answers this criticism in a wonderful essay that he wrote called The Government of the Tongue. And he says, no, poetry has never stopped a tank, it's true, but it does allow us to go down into a sort of pure well of pure water, language putting us in touch with our humanity. And I think behind that is something that Charles Taylor rather memorably said, that it's never just my language, it's always our language. Language is a common human phenomenon. It's what links us to each other and to those in the past. The words come back to us from the dead and link us to future generations. So language is a very, very precious commodity. And Heaney in this essay says, okay, but poetry allows us to pause, and it's the same kind of pause as occurred when the woman taken in adultery was brought before Christ. It's in St. John's Gospel, chapter 8. And they say, you know, this woman needs to be stoned. And he kneels down on the ground and writes "estengein," it says in the Greek, in the earth, in the sand, in the dust. And Heaney says, poetry, says the writing of those characters is like poetry, a break with the usual life, but not an absconding from it. It does not say to the accusing crowd or to the helpless accused, now a solution will take place. It does not propose to be instrumental or effective. Instead, in the rift between what is going to happen and whatever we would wish to happen, poetry holds attention for a space, functions not as distraction, but as pure concentration, a focus where our power to concentrate is concentrated back on ourselves. And of course, one thinks often of Heaney's poetry. Remember, he wrote a wonderful poem called Personal Helicon, where he talks about poetry as if it's going down a well. And I think that's what I think here, that language is like the water you take from a source, from a spring, pure and undistorted. It's especially true when we're surrounded by distortions of the truth at the moment. It's good to have language which is about truth, which puts us in touch with fundamental truths. And I think for that purpose, I'd like to start with a wonderful poem which I was only introduced to recently by Adam Zagajewski, who died, I think, last year. And it's called Try to Praise the Mutilated World, and you probably know it very well in Polish. Try to praise the mutilated world. Remember June's long days and wild strawberries, drops of rosé wine, the nettles that methodically overgrow the abandoned homesteads of exiles. You must praise the mutilated world. You watched the stylish yachts and ships. One of them had a long trip ahead of it, while salty oblivion awaited others. You've seen the refugees going nowhere. You've heard the executioners sing joyfully. You should praise the mutilated world. Remember the moments when we were together in a white room and the curtain fluttered. Return in thought to the concert where music flared. You gathered acorns in the park in autumn and leaves eddied over the earth's scars. Praise the mutilated world and the grey feather a thrush lost, and the gentle light that strays and vanishes and returns. A poem I think that rather similar in tone was written by Auden on the 1st of September 1939, when he had just left England for the United States. And he was obviously reflecting on the war that was on that very day breaking out. It's called September 1, 1939. I sit in one of the dives on 52nd Street, uncertain and afraid, as the clever hopes expire of a low, dishonest decade. Waves of anger and fear circulate over the bright and darkened lands of the earth, obsessing our private lives. The unmentionable odor of death offends the September night. Accurate scholarship can unearth the whole offense from Luther until now that has driven a culture mad. Find what occurred at Linz, what huge imago made a psychopathic God. I and the public know what all school children learn. Those to whom evil is done do evil in return. Exiled Thucydides knew all that a speech can say about democracy and what dictators do, the elderly rubbish they talk to an apathetic grave. Analyzed all in his book, the enlightenment driven away, the habit-forming pain, mismanagement and grief. We must suffer them all again. Into this neutral air where blind skyscrapers use their full height to proclaim the strength of collective man. Each language pours its vain competitive excuse. But who can live for long in an euphoric dream? Out of the mirror they stare imperialism's face and the international wrong. Faces along the bar cling to their average day. The lights must never go out, the music must always play. All the conventions conspire to make this fort assume the furniture of home, lest we should see where we are, lost in a haunted wood. Children afraid of the night, who have never been happy or good. The windiest militant trash important persons shout is not so crude as our wish. What mad Nijinsky wrote about Diaghilev is true of the normal heart. For the error bred in the bone of each woman and each man craves what it cannot have, not universal love, but to be loved alone. From the conservative dark into the ethical life, the dense commuters come, repeating their morning vow, I will be true to the wife, I'll concentrate more on my work, and helpless governors wake to resume their compulsory game. Who can release them now? Who can reach the deaf? Who can speak for the dumb? All I have is a voice to undo the folded lie, the romantic lie in the brain of the sensual man in the street, and the lie of authority whose buildings grope the sky. There is no such thing as the state, and no one exists alone. Hunger allows no choice to the citizen or the police. We must love one another or die. Defenseless under the night, our world in stupor lies. Yet dotted everywhere, ironic points of light flash out wherever the just exchange their messages. May I compose like them, of eros and of dust, beleaguered by the same negation and despair, show an affirming flame. I want to turn now to three poems by the great Nobel Prize-winning Polish poet Czesław Miłosz. All of them, I think, very much relevant to our present situation. Dedication. You whom I could not save, listen to me. Try to understand this simple speech as I would be ashamed of another. I swear there is in me no wizardry of words. I speak to you with silence like a cloud or a tree. What strengthened me for you was lethal. You mixed up farewell to an epoch with the beginning of a new one. Inspiration of hatred with lyrical beauty. Blind force with accomplished shape. Here is a valley of shallow Polish rivers and an immense bridge going into white fog. Here is a broken city, and the wind throws the screams of gulls on your grave when I am talking with you. What is poetry which does not save nations or people? A connivance with official lies, a song of drunkards whose throats will be cut in a moment, readings for sophomore girls, that I wanted good poetry without knowing it, that I discovered late its salutary aim. In this, and only this, I find salvation. They used to pour millet on graves or poppy seeds to feed the dead who would come disguised as birds. I put this book here for you, who once lived, so that you should visit us no more. And the second poem by Miłosz is called Incantation. Human reason is beautiful and invincible. No bars, no barbed wire, no pulping of books, no sentence of banishment can prevail against it. It establishes the universal ideas in language and guides our hands so we write truth and justice with capital letters, lie and oppression with small. It puts what should be above things as they are, is an enemy of despair and a friend of hope. It does not know Jew from Greek or slave from master, giving us the estate of the world to manage. It saves austere and transparent phrases from the filthy discord of tortured words. It says that everything is new under the sun, opens the congealed fist of the past. Beautiful and very young are philosophia and poetry, her ally in the service of the good. As late as yesterday, nature celebrated their birth. The news was brought to the mountains by a unicorn and an echo. Their friendship will be glorious. Their time has no limit. Their enemies have delivered themselves to destruction. And the third poem, You Who Wronged. You who wronged a simple man bursting into laughter at the crime, and kept a pack of fools around you to mix good and evil to blur the line. Though everyone bowed down before you, saying virtue and wisdom lit your way, striking gold medals in your honor, glad to have survived another day. Do not feel safe. The poet remembers. You can kill one, but another is born. The words are written down, the deed, the date, and you'd have done better with a winter dawn, a rope and a branch bowed beneath your weight. I want to read now a couple of poems that come really from the time of the First World War. The first one is not actually anything to do with the First War, but was written in Easter 1916 in Ireland by the great Irish poet William Butler Yeats. And it's a reflection on life, really, and the hardness that comes with having to fight. And he is here reflecting what has happened to those who took part in the Easter Rising, as it's called, of 1916. And I always thought it's one of the most beautiful poems he wrote. It's got the names of many of the people who were subsequently executed by the British in a very, very foolish and unjust deed. But he reflects, really, the poem at the heart of it is a reflection on the beauty of the ordinary things of life. And I've been thinking about this in the last few days as we've gone further into this dreadful conflict and we look at all the awful scenes, and you have to remind yourself of the beautiful things that are in ordinary time. And this does that, I think. Easter 1916. I have met them at close of day, coming with vivid faces, from counter or desk among grey 18th century houses. I'll wait for the clock to, I'm sorry about this, I'll stop for a moment. Easter 1916. I have met them at close of day, coming with vivid faces, from counter or desk among grey 18th century houses. I have passed with a nod of the head or polite, meaningless words, or have lingered a while and said polite, meaningless words, and thought before I had done of a mocking tale or a jibe to please a companion around the fire at the club, being certain that they and I but lived where motley is worn. All changed, changed utterly. A terrible beauty is born. That woman's days were spent in ignorant goodwill, her nights in argument, until her voice grew shrill. What voice more sweet than hers when young and beautiful she rode to harriers? This man had kept a school and rode out winged horse. This other, his helper and friend, was coming into his force. He might have won fame in the end, so sensitive his nature seemed, so daring and sweet his thought. This other man I had dreamed a drunken, vainglorious lout. He had done most bitter wrong to some who are near my heart. Yet I number him in the song. He too has resigned his part in the casual comedy. He too has been changed in his turn, transformed utterly. A terrible beauty is born. Hearts with one purpose alone, through summer and winter seen, enchanted to a stone, to trouble the living stream. The horse that comes from the road, the rider, the birds that range from cloud to tumbling cloud. Minute by minute they change. A shadow of cloud on the stream changes minute by minute. A horse hoof slides on the brim and a horse plashes within it. The long-legged moorhens dive and hens to moorcocks call. Minute by minute they live. The stones in the midst of all. Too long a sacrifice can make a stone of the heart. Oh, when may it suffice? That is heaven's part. Our part, to murmur name upon name, as a mother names her child, when sleep at last has come on limbs that had run wild. What is it but nightfall? No, no, not night, but death. Was it needless death after all? For England may keep faith, for all that is done and said. We know their dream, enough to know they dreamed and are dead. And what if excess of love bewildered them till they died? I write it out in a verse, MacDonagh and MacBride and Connolly and Pearse, now and in time to be, wherever green is worn or changed, changed utterly, a terrible beauty is born. The next poem I want to read is a very, very short poem, but I think one of the greatest poems written during the First War by Wilfred Owen, who was killed actually 1 week before the end of the war. And he was born in 1893, died just on the 4th of November 1918. And it's a reflection on a young body that Owen looks at and reflects on the terrible waste of life, and again on what life should be about, sowing and reaping. And he uses that as a contrast with the terrible finality of death. It's called Futility. Move him into the sun. Gently its touch awoke him once at home, whispering of fields half sown. Always it woke him, even in France, until this morning and this snow. If anything might rouse him now, the kind old sun will know. Think how it wakes the seeds, woke once the clays of a cold star. Our limbs so dear achieved, our sides full nerved, still warm, too hard to stir? Was it for this the clay grew tall? Oh, what made fatuous sunbeams toil to break earth's sleep at all? I want to read now a poem by Ukrainian poet, Professor Zabawa found, Ivan Franko. And it's, again, coming from this very early period and reflecting on revolution, rather close perhaps to the Yeats poem. It's called The Spirit of Revolt, the Eternal Revolutionary. The spirit of revolt abides, spirit which spurs flesh to endeavor, to fight for freedom, progress, ever lives with us still. It has not died. No tortures of the Inquisition, nor strong-built walls of czarist prison, neither armies strongly mustered, nor cannon primed around it clustered, nor the spy's art conceal its doom, nor force it down into the tomb. It does not die, lives with us still, though born 1,000 years back, coddled till yesterday, but now unswaddled. Forward it strides by its own will, ever more powerful, stronger growing, thither it speeds where dawn is glowing. Its word of power, like a reveille, calls millions forth with it to rally. And millions follow and rejoice, led onwards by the Spirit's voice. The Spirit's voice is heard far round, in hen-coop homes of peasant wretches, among the workers' factory benches. Through tears and sorrow it resounds, and where that voice is heard, there vanish away their tears, misfortune, anguish. Courage and strength are born within them. To cease their grief, strive onward, winning, if not for self, a better life, then for their children in the strife. The spirit of revolt abides. Spirit, knowledge, thought, and freedom shall never yield, and the impeding darkness shall never stay its tide. Evil in ruins fell around us. The avalanche sped rolling downwards. Where in this world such mighty forces to halt its ever onward courses, or like a fire to quench away the sparks of its unfolding day. And finally, I'd like to read a poem which not only keeps war as a distant echo, but reflects again on it as in contrast to all the things that bring life, flowers, bees, moonlight, apples, and looks at what is happening now in a long perspective, imagining, looking back on it in the future. And it's by another poet who died in the First War, Edward Thomas, who died in 1917. And I think we've read this poem before. I'm afraid it is one of my favorite poems, but I think it's particularly good at this time because, so you see, it puts us in touch with these fundamentals of life. And as we watch life being snuffed out so horrifically and so frequently at the moment, we need to remind ourselves of what life itself is. It's called The Sun Used to Shine. The sun used to shine while we two walked slowly together, paused and started again, and sometimes mused, sometimes talked as either pleased, and cheerfully parted each night. We never disagreed which gate to rest on. The to be and the late past, we gave small heed. We turned from men or poetry to rumors of the war remote, only till both stood disinclined for aught but the yellow flavorous coat of an apple wasps had undermined, or a century of dark betonies, the stateliest of small flowers on earth at the forest verge, or crocuses, pale purple, as if they had their birth in sunless Hades fields. The war came back to mind, with the moonrise which soldiers in the east afar beheld then. Nevertheless, our eyes could as well imagine the Crusades or Caesar's battles. Everything to faintness like those rumors fades, like the brook's water glittering under the moonlight, like those walks now, like us two that took them, and the fallen apples, all the talks and silence, like memory's sand, when the tide covers it late or soon, and other men through other flowers in those fields under the same moon go talking and have easy hours. And I'm reminded of an evening I spent in January where we read poetry. And one of the people there was a Ukrainian poet here on a scholarship who read some passionate, her own poems passionately. And a Belarusian poet who had taken his poems and his guitar around the courtyards of his native city. And it was very moving to hear how the people in Belarus had just been thirsting for poetry, for language, for truth. And I think that it's difficult for us at the moment not to feel that anything else but doing something useful, which is important at the moment, but that nothing else matters very much. But actually, it does matter what we do with language and with poetry and literature. These are what are going to save us in the long run, in what is otherwise threatening to become a mad world. But there are beautiful things in it, and poetry celebrates life. Thank you very much.